Eu sou Andresa Rodrigues, eu sou a mãe do Bruno. Bruno é meu único filho, que foi assassinado junto com mais 271 joias no dia 25 de janeiro de 2019, era uma sexta-feira e era um dia normal. E naquela manhã o Bruno se levantou e foi para o trabalho, né, como todos os dias. Aí pela primeira vez a imagem do rompimento, ela veio a público. Quando eu vi aquela barragem, né, e eu vou dizer assim, com a expressão de vomitar mesmo, eu pensei, eles mataram o Bruno. Aquela barragem deu sinais e alguém ignorou. Eles mataram o Bruno lá. E matou muita gente lá, porque ficava tudo embaixo da barragem.
Eu perdi meu irmão Sandro, 42 anos na época, deixou 2 filhas, uma de 6 anos, uma de 9 e um filho de 21 anos e esposa. Eu perdi também meu primo Marlon, 35 anos na época, ele deixou uma filhinha de 2 anos e esposa. O Sandro ele ia fazer 15 anos de empresa Vale e o Marlon ia fazer 6 anos.
Para mim era o melhor lugar do mundo, onde eu tinha o projeto de vida que as empresas destruíram no dia 5 de novembro. Quando a barragem rompeu e mataram 20 pessoas, destruiu toda a minha comunidade, mas só para deixar claro que a minha comunidade, a gente não construiu ela debaixo da mineração. A minha comunidade é do século XVIII. A mineração é que construiu em cima da gente, porque quando a barragem rompeu, a Samarco ia fazer 40 anos. E a minha comunidade tinha mais de 300 anos. Eu não perdi nenhum familiar no dia 5, mas eu perdi amigos, perdi a minha identidade.
A tailing dam is a dam that is constructed by the mining company to store the residues that are left from basically washing all the stones to remove only the minerals that they are interested on to sell in the market. There are many different ways of building those dams. The cheapest one is what we call an upstream dam. It's also the most vulnerable.
So Latin America is a region that is very highly dependent economically on exporting commodities. There's a close connection between extractive industries and the political economy of Latin America. It means that the overwhelming power of these mining companies that are so important to economies really often get negligible oversight or regulatory control. This is really, in my view, an issue of structural violence. It's structural, as my late colleague Paul Farmer would have said, because these are processes that are embedded in broader political and economic institutional arrangements. And it's violence because it's systematically injuring certain populations with health effects, with environmental effects, with effects on livelihoods, with community cohesion and identity effects, major economic effects for those people as well.
Eu só encontrei o Bruno 105 dias depois. Então o rompimento da barragem ele significou assim, para mim, um divisor de águas, né? Eu era a pessoa mais rica, mais abençoada e eu tinha certeza disso, né? O rompimento da barragem ele me tornou a pessoa mais miserável, porque aquilo que eu tinha de mais valoroso fisicamente do meu lado foi tirado brutalmente de mim. Então, o rompimento da barragem, né, apagou meu coração, mas acendeu ainda mais o dele em mim. E hoje eu escolhi fazer a luta, lutar, do luto à luta, porque eu era isso ou morrer, né, junto.
O dinheiro não traz as coisas que eu perdi, o dinheiro não traz felicidade. A gente não precisa de uma mineração que mata, de uma mineração predatória. Porque a mineração, ela não dá. As pessoas acham que ela dá um emprego, que ela dá um bom salário, mas a mineração ela não dá, muito pelo contrário, ela tira.
We have a long way to go in changing the process on how those things get approved and how they are monitored. For example, it makes absolutely no sense if a company produces an environmental impact assessment for a new large infrastructure, that this report is produced by the company that is proposing the major construction. In addition, when you have the monitoring of the activities and the reports that say if the mining is working okay or not, those reports are also issued by those companies. So there is a major conflict of interest both in the approval and in making sure that somebody is overseeing the activities. This has to be done by an independent body. Otherwise, how you can really make sure that things are going as they should be. So unless you have other sources of economic activity, other sources of improving the livelihoods of the population that they can really engage and still get the necessary resources to move on with their lives and their families, the mining will still be the place where they can go to get their paycheck. And that actually gives a lot of power for the mining to do whatever they want, because they know that they can get part of the population on their side because they depend on them.
This narrative that has really colonized not only the minds of people who live in the areas, but governments and really everybody, that this is the way it needs to be. For economic progress, for modernization, we need this mining, we need the revenue from this mining, which again, the region is highly dependent on, and there's no alternative. And that leads to, just a fatalistic acceptance and the idea that, well, we can only tweak around the edges. We can try to make the mines safer in some ways, but then who's going to actually monitor that safety? The mining companies themselves?
Essa falta de justiça é uma coisa que dói muito nos familiares, que acaba adoecendo ainda mais, porque viram o crime acontecer, viram a perda do seu familiar, mas vê também a justiça caminhando lentamente.
Porque a injustiça, ela segue cada vez mais potente no Brasil. É algo surreal. 5 anos depois e nada de justiça, né? A não repetição, então a gente luta para o cumprimento das leis. Nós temos lá uma aprovação da Lei Mar de Lamas Nunca Mais, ela foi apresentada na Assembleia quando rompeu Mariana em 2015. Ela só foi aprovada quando rompeu Brumadinho em 2019. E leis como essa, elas conseguem fazer com que as barragens tenham mais segurança, porque descomissiona, né? Porque lidar com essa ausência da justiça potencializa a nossa dor e afirma para as empresas minerárias ou outras que não seja do ramo da mineração que matar em nome do lucro está tudo bem e que pode seguir esse formato, porque nada vai ser feito, né? Que é esse o caminho, que eles não precisam recalcular a rota, que não precisa ter segurança nas barragens, né? Que não precisa ter de fato uma fiscalização sem maquiagem, que precisa de fato pensar esse modelo, repensar esse modelo, né? Com foco na vida, na segurança, no cuidado com as pessoas, com o meio ambiente, com as comunidades, né? Essa ausência de justiça, ela potencializa o crime. Então, para nós, reparação é isso, justiça, responsabilização criminal para quem não fez o papel dela como deveria ter feito.
Se a gente fosse olhar e se de fato tivesse justiça, não que a Samarco não voltasse a minerar. Porque eu sei que, infelizmente, muitas pessoas acham e colocam na cabeça que depende da mineração. Mas a gente não depende dessa mineração.
So if we think about what justice really means, justice is not going to come just with reparations. There's no money that can pay the lives lost. But justice comes in recognizing that there was a mistake, in making changes to guarantee that those mistakes are not going to happen again, in listening to the population, in finding where those people should go, what kind of house they should have. Justice comes in helping to find all the remains of every single victim. It comes in really reestablishing the sustainability of the environment, in removing the mud from the rivers, not 25% as they propose or 50% of the mud, but really bringing back the life of the river. And that's the fear that a lot of the local population have. We're gonna die and nothing is gonna happen.
I think the action proceeding in the UK courts against BHP and Vale are incredibly important. I mean, you have, I think, 700,000 people in the class. I don't think it's where we necessarily want to end up at the end of the day. That's not to say that I think this action is really, really important. But I think what we want to be able to have is our own countries to be accountable and to be able to provide redress for victims, to remediate the environmental harms, and to hold the culpable accountable on a real time frame, right? If our legal institutions can do that, then we can prevent these future tragedies.
This event was just incredibly powerful. I have been doing human rights work in the field for 30 years, and I was absolutely devastated by the film, by the testimonies of people. And you know, it's very easy at Harvard to talk about these things in an abstract kind of way, to present figures and evidence, but to have people who embody what has gone on, to tell their stories, to be able to interact with them, and of course also to wrap that around with the scientific information, with the academic analyses, is important, but to actually bring that to Harvard so that people can really have a visceral sense of this incredible injustice is very, very powerful, and in my view, very important.
It's really important to have conversations about environmental catastrophes, tragedies like this, at Harvard, because these tragedies are occurring all over the world, in the global south, in the United States, everywhere, right? And what we need to do is to come up with a toolkit and a playbook that our institutions can respond to these things and make sure that they don't happen again, right? And that's why this program is especially important, right? Because the lessons weren't learned, and we're talking about two incredibly transformative, awful tragedies. So the questions we need to ask about our legal institutions is, how do we prevent these things going forward? How do we get justice for the victims? How do we make sure the people who are culpable are held to account? And how making sure that we remediate these environmental harms, which are also catastrophic.
I think everybody that came those 2 days left the room today a different person. It was extremely important to see how hard is the fight. This collective effort in bringing visibility to these events is important for them and for everybody, because we still have dams that are at very high risk of having some kind of collapse. What an incredible lesson of courage and resilience each one of those community members gave us. They lost family members, and they were there, stronger than any of us in that room, telling their story. I firmly believe that we can stop dreaming, and it made me remind of a song from Raul Seixas, who had one piece saying, "A dream that you dream alone is just a dream that you dream alone, but a dream that you dream together is reality." And I think that's one of the messages that we had in that really powerful event we had is if we all dream together, it may take time, but we'll get there.